Good day. Welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. And today we're going to dive into a Q&A, which is essentially going to be an overrated, underrated session over nutrition, training, and weight loss. And then plus I'll give you an update on how things have been going with my own training and nutrition and my future training and nutrition goals. Now, before I dive into everything, I got to tell you something really cool that's coming into the RQTN system, and that is a completely free do-it-yourself group. This is not a paid thing. This is literally just sign up, get into the group, and you got access to everything that you need to figure out your own weight loss and training goals. So essentially what it is a Facebook group. It's the RQTN Do-It-Yourself Fitness. And the reason why we're doing the do-it-yourself fitness is so that it's for you. It's like, especially if you're trying to save money after the holidays, but you feel like if you just had the path given to you, you would do it. This is what I offer. And it shows you the exact system that I do with my clients, but you can do it yourself. And you're going to get accountability and support in the group. So there's a group every week. We do accountability check-ins. And then from there, you actually get access to a portal through the group that'll give you all of the video trainings that you need to figure out your diet, to figure out what kind of foods you want, how to figure out your calories, how to figure out how to know that where your metabolism roughly is, how to fit in your treat foods, how to figure out your training, how to know the right weekly workout split, how to speed up your workouts, make them 30-minute workouts. All the trainings are in there, plus mindset tips, plus mindset trainings. I've literally had performance psychologists come in and talk to my clients. It's all in there, and it's all for free, 100%. So if you're very interested in it, don't hesitate to reach out on social media, via email, if you're on my newsletter, and I'll let you know about the Do-It-Yourself Fitness Group. This is kickstarting on January 6th in 2025. Very excited for that. Let's dive into overrated, underrated. This is going to be a fun one because I got a lot of good questions that were proposed through Instagram. Coconut water. Coconut water is actually a really interesting one. I think it's overrated to the degree of how much you pay for it, but it can be underrated as just an alternative beverage that you can have that's nutritious. So it's pretty costly, like, beverage to have routinely. If you can have it every single day, that's an expensive thing. You're looking at, a couple bucks or something like that. But it does have a fair bit of nutrients in it. If you look at the nutritional profile, it comes with a bunch of little minerals, not at super high quantities, but a lot of different ones, and especially potassium, which is an electrolyte. And so it does actually come with a little bit of carbs, not a ton. You are getting a little bit of carbs, but not at a very high level. So it isn't a bad drink. I'm actually a fan of it. And what I really recommend people do, if you're going to have coconut water, try mixing it with almond milk. This is one of my favorite refreshing beverages. I find that coconut water is kind of sweet, but it's also got a weird texture, and I feel like it's missing something. But then when I have almond milk, unsweetened, it's got this nice texture, but it's missing sweetness. And when you mix coconut water with almond milk, it complements each other. The texture of the almond milk dominates, and then the sweetness of the coconut water actually complements the rest. And I worked out the calories. Like, if you have a cup of each of them, so that's 2 cups, 500 milliliters, that'd be 75 calories. That's like half of what milk would be. Now, milk will come with more more protein probably, but it still comes at a low calorie amount for a little small amount of nutrients. And I always call it like a low calorie electrolyte drink. It's not a ton of electrolytes. It's not as potent as like a Gatorade or a Pedialyte, but that's where I would say it's underrated, is it can be used as an alternative beverage that comes with some nutrients, but it's overrated based on the total cost. That's how I feel about coconut water overall. Now, gut health. This was a really interesting question or sentiment proposed. Role of gut health in overall weight loss / maintenance regime. And so this is a really important one because the term gut health is overrated. That's the real key. Now, let's just pick that apart, gut health. Because if someone has what they call a healthy gut, they're really talking about healthy gut microbiome, right? And we really got excited when we realized that gut microbiome is super influential on our health. And there's billions, I think maybe even trillions of different gut microbiome. But that's actually really important. There's so many, and we know so little. It's like we just got excited about discovering the Pacific Ocean. We're like, hey, look at all this stuff in the Pacific Ocean. It's like, yeah, we're just getting to know it. And we have a long way to go. Now, just to come back to this, we talk about someone, what if they have a healthy gut? We say you got to have a healthy gut. It's like, absolutely. But we don't have to target the term healthy gut. We just have to have a healthy diet. We have to have a healthy diet routine. We have to make sure we're digesting our food well. But the word healthy gut started to target this idea about having healthy gut microbiome. And so because of that, it became a real idea for marketing towards, hey, we can have these probiotics, these prebiotics, it'll solve all your problems. It won't, especially when it comes to some of the different pro and prebiotics, is they're not even active cultures. Unless you're getting it from fermentable foods, these aren't active things that are really going to make a difference in your digestion. If someone is hoping to hedge their bets, and that's the thing, it's hedge your bets because you really don't know on having a healthier gut microbiome, include fermentable foods, which would be like kimchi, it could be kefir, some yogurts, and just things that are essentially already natural products that can help improve your healthy gut microbiome. I totally understand that. Have a lot of fiber, like both insoluble and soluble fiber are ways to improve your gut health. But come back to it. If someone has a healthy diet and they feel like their food's digesting, they don't have to target any of this. They don't have to because they have a healthy diet. So then, even look at these gut health coaches, they're all going to make you do the same thing. It's just a different ribbon wrapped around the same package. So I don't love the idea of calling it gut health. I just would say it's a healthy diet. The thing that does need to be paid attention to is digestion. And maybe it's just because I see so much of the marketing and the commercialization around the term gut health that I don't like it and I push against it. And it doesn't sell as much as good digestion, the digestion diet, but people call it the gut health diet, right? It doesn't have the saying ring, but that's really what we're talking about here, because some people might be eating otherwise healthy food and have digestion issues with it. Maybe they're constipated. Maybe they are actually just too loose in their stool. Maybe they're bloated. Maybe they're feeling bloated and lethargic and they actually don't know why. And it seems like otherwise healthy food, but you end up with sensitivities. I'll be very open that I've started to finally recognize my own IBS issues. IBS being irritable bowel syndrome, which essentially I started to realize that certain sugars and alcohols will cause this issue when I eat. So I used to love garlic and onions. I mean, I love the taste of them for sure, and I would include it all the time. And now it's finally sitting in. It's like, no, that causes that issue. And just in the last few months, I was really trying to pick it apart. Even during sober October, I was doing no diet drinks. That was my sobriety push. And just to sober up from diet drinks, because hey, maybe it was a carbonation from those diet drinks that could be affecting it. And it did. That actually just made me worse because my appetite went up because I couldn't have my diet drinks. And then just recently, I started to pull away from salsa. I started pulling away from my sugar-free barbecue sauce and all those things. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel as bloated. And that made me feel lighter. That made me feel like I was just leaner. I felt better. Because when I'm walking around and I'm trying to train people and I feel like a balloon and I gotta crop dust the place. I gotta hide in the corner and be like, don't come near me because I got a fart over here. That's not a great experience. And the individual that I know that posted this has a gut response, has a digestion response, better kind of phrasing there, has a digestion response that actually will stimulate, essentially such a bad reaction in his body that it causes even anxiety. And so that's bad digestion. And I think what is the role overall in digestion in health is a better phrasing, because if we call it gut health, people are going to start to look at the real commercialized objects and stuff like that. When it's like, what is the digestion? Just plain and simple. Are you full during it as you should be? Are you staying full long enough? Are you getting bloating? Are you getting constipation? Are you getting too fast of stools? How does that affect you? And so the overall role of digestion is underrated by people, but the term gut health, I believe, is very overrated. And especially because the digestion is what's going to be the long-term sustainability of any diet. I'll even go back to having those sugar-free sauces and all that stuff would help me lose weight. And even, it was kind of helping me maintain my weight loss. But now it's not worth it long term because it's causing so many problems in my routine. And you got to think for yourself when you're making your own diet plan is this diet sustainable? Does the digestion of this food make me feel good? And this individual I work with, and we've always come back to, he's like, what diet do you feel good on? And he said, well, it was the foods that you encouraged me to use. And it was like, okay, so we have a really good reason to stick to them because your overall digestion is going to help this long-term game towards weight loss and weight maintenance. So again, I'll just summarize by saying gut health as a term is overrated. Digestion as a goal for your health is underrated. From there, that actually leads really well into one of the other questions I got, which was gluten-free diet, not specific to allergies. Now, the reason why I think this rolls into it well is because I know what this individual is referring to because we get really fired up with this gluten-free idea, and it have been for a while. It was actually Ryan Reynolds who had made a tweet or something like that about it. And he said, people are so afraid of gluten that you could hold up a coffee shop with a bagel because it's true. Anything that said gluten-free, people were so attracted to. Now, I feel like it's coming down a little bit. I felt like it was very, very big in the culture, kind of like where gluten or gut health is now, gluten-free was, especially with the paleo movement and stuff like that. Now, I will say that gluten-free, if you don't have an allergy, it can be overrated. Now, the way I want to phrase this, because there's details here that actually do matter, in that I don't think that it's just about a gluten allergy. I do believe that food sensitivity is a spectrum. And we are just on the precipice of appreciating what it means to be sensitive to things. And I'll go back to what I was just talking about with digestion. So do you digest this well enough to keep it in your diet long term? Or do you digest it well enough to have it a little bit? And just kind of like how there's a spectrum of how people can be sensitive to dairy, I think gluten could be similar. I think a lot of foods are like this. And this is why there's a lot of different naturopaths and food testing coming up. And I'm actually okay with it. I just wish that we could make it more solid and make it more concrete evidence. But it's too new, right? For us to really know. And new science is always going to be a messy one. And I just hope people are being scientific with it in the process of creating their products. So I think whenever someone goes to a naturopath or gets food sensitivity testing, just be cautious of it. Because just because someone says that you have a dairy sensitivity doesn't mean you do. And I'll go to back to the gluten example, because there's a gluten placebo effect that you got to be really cautious of. Now, I didn't look into the details of this study specifically. This was more of a story from the Chris Williamson podcast, which is called Modern Wisdom. And it's a really important story because if this, case is specifically true, and I wouldn't imagine he would have made up this study. But essentially what it was is they had people come in for some food testing. I'm not sure if it was food testing or what it was, but they all ate some food. Everyone in the room ate food. And I think all of them were allegedly sensitive to gluten. And then after everyone ate the food, I think it was just a little while after, they came in the room and said, hey, just so you know, that actually had gluten in it. And then people were vomiting, they had diarrhea, they were breaking out in hives. Everyone was freaking out. Almost everyone had a manifestation of some sort of reactive. There was zero gluten in the building. It was all just manifested. So I think that's a really important implication, that we have to pay attention to how we feel about something, because that changes everything, right? If we think that there's gluten in it and it's like, oh, wow, that's why I'm feeling this way. That's why I'm having my acne breakout. That's why I couldn't sleep. It's because of this. And this is where it gets overrated, where people are overrating what gluten can actually do to them without properly knowing that it's gluten and testing it appropriately. And again, I'll come back to that. It's just, we don't have enough resources for everyone to test this accurately. We just don't. And most of the food sensitivity places will actually just make you hyper paranoid on gluten. It just seems to be the one that a lot of them will go after. And I've even heard of just parents that can get like almost helicopter parenting their kids' diet. One of my clients has a friend that it's just incredible how much they need to prevent their kid from having any gluten without any testing whatsoever. And so that's a real negative thing on the kid's experience growing up. If you don't have any proof that your kid's going to be gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive in any way, and you're trying to prevent them from eating anything, every parent that has to feed them has to make sure they have the right food. That's going to be a net negative. So that's overrating how much you need to fear gluten. Now, with that being said, I still do believe some people need to pay attention to it because, as I mentioned, not necessarily gut health, but digestion is super important. So what does this mean? Like, how do you know? And as I said, you almost gotta test yourself. So I think what is underrated is elimination diets at some point in time, especially if you think you're otherwise eating healthy and you're noticing some digestion issues. But in general, I do believe, I'm not saying you have to do an elimination diet at some point in your life. I'm saying you could and should do an elimination diet at some point in your life. Because if you just essentially, and make sure we kind of like define what I mean by elimination diet, is you go through a process of just eating the least processed food possible. It's a very whole food diet. So it's kind of like the Whole30 is what they used to call it. And even then, that's a debatable spectrum of what is whole food and what isn't. We've done it with clients before, and it actually really does change the way people feel about food. So essentially, you're looking at meats, fruits, and vegetables. And then from there, what can you have for any accessories to the diet that you would still see as being whole food? A lot of my clients do this similar setup where we talk about very simplistic carbs. So we're talking about rice, even brown rice, quinoa, couscous, the sweet potatoes, all those things that essentially, if you're cooking it and then you're eating it, then we use that as your carbohydrate or fruits and vegetables. And then we look into our meats and we make our meats very mostly lean, but if they have some higher protein meats that have some fat on them, we can use that as well. And when you do that, even for a couple of weeks, that's what I usually say. If anyone wants to test something, give it a couple of weeks. Now, what's interesting is a lot of the more, I want to say it's naturopath, but the people who are doing a lot of these elimination style diets that are getting you to do food sensitivity, they actually say it should be 6 weeks. The reason I say 2 is because it's hard. It's hard for people to do anything for 2 weeks even. Now, if you do 2 weeks and then you want to slowly reintroduce things, I think that's a good system. So essentially you would do an elimination style diet. You keep everything nice and whole food based for a couple of weeks, and it proves to you, hey, I can go through the weekend just eating whole foods. I can go through, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I can get into a routine and I can cook with these foods. You might get sick of some of them. And then after the 2 weeks is up, you start to alter it. But that's where you start to reintroduce things. And then those can make the poison. You can have too much milk and just feel like, wow, I'm really bloated on milk. I never used to get bloated on milk, but I just happen to have 4 cups tonight, so I don't feel good. I don't think fruit really causes too much of a massive sensitivity to me. But if I'm at a social gathering and the only thing I feel like eating is fruit, eventually I'll feel like, man, I've had too much. Like, it doesn't feel like it's digesting well. And that's really what we're asking, is pay attention to digestion. So you start to reintroduce things, and then you start to really compare even the amount. Maybe you have a piece of toast with your eggs in the morning and that would have gluten in it, versus having a big bowl of pasta in the evening. And is it whole wheat pasta or is it white pasta? And again, what do those 2 different foods do for you? And that is your own personal experience. That's what I would say you do. And don't be afraid to repeat the test. So experiments usually have a lot of things within them. They try to have a control group. So one person doing nothing, and then they try to have the test. And usually, even let's say a study finds something, a study is only really, or sorry, I should say a theory is only reinforced once multiple studies have linked or have shown the same thing again and again. And then that's where you have many studies and you have what you call a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis, if you ever hear someone refer to it, is just talking about a study that reviews all of the literature or as much as they want to include based on the parameters of the theory. So let's say it is about gluten. Okay. So they would do a meta-analysis over the course of a certain time frame, and they would look at what features of the studies that they would want to include, the different populations, the parameters, the control groups, and everything, and then what trends, and then they statistically analyze all of that data all together. And then that's where they start to really believe that you have strong theories. But one study only gives you a direction for a new study. And then multiple repeated studies is where you start to say, hey, we have some solid evidence now. And it's really hard to do that when you're just yourself. So I do encourage you to have that, elimination diet to help give you a 0 point. And then you slowly reintroduce maybe 1 or 2 things a week. And you continue to do that repetitively over time. So I'll come back to, is gluten-free diet not specific to a food allergy overrated? I think it can be by some people. For those who haven't done an elimination diet and tried reintroducing it, it's overrated. For those who eat gluten all the time and they're wondering why they don't digest things very well, I think it's underrated. So I don't like to put a blanket, and that's why I'm actually not good at this game, overrated, underrated, because I really appreciate nuance and detail, because I see so many different types of people when it comes to dieting, especially. I think with exercise, it's far less likely that you see such a variety, but you see a lot of variety within diet, and especially nowadays, food sensitivity. If there's one thing that I'm really hoping comes out of the diet culture in the next, just nutrition culture, rather, diet culture, in the next 10 to 20 years, we get more solid evidence to give people an indication on what they should be able to know about themselves. And I think that's where genetic testing could actually lead to. I recently done more of a DNA swab on, they took my hair and reviewed all the information of the food that I would be sensitive to. Some of it I actually wasn't surprised. I had a feeling about egg whites for a while because I've heard of people having a sensitivity to egg protein. And I eat egg white protein quite often, but I did start to notice, like, I'm kind of like, gassy often, but I eat it often. I took egg whites out along with the sugar-free sauces, and I started getting better. And then when I reintroduced some egg whites later that day, I might end up a little bit more gassy. Now, it's not the end of the world. I'm not breaking out in hives or anything like that, but I don't want to spend my life gassy, so I rarely will have egg whites as often. One other thing, though, that they mentioned in there was red grapes. Those are my favorite grapes. I'm sorry, I haven't noticed any net negative to those grapes. I haven't. And so there's a few other ones that, they say I should caution, and I could look more into it. But again, I prefer to do my own experiment on myself. And I pay attention to when I eat something in the next 3 to 4 hours, or even the next 12 to 24 hours. Do I feel worse? Do I feel okay? Do I feel good? And that's the best way that I think you can use it until there are better testing metrics that are readily available for everyone. And that's kind of how I feel about, the gluten-free diet approach. Okay, the next one was vegan. Is vegan diet overrated or underrated? I will say that I'll give some context here because I think it's important here. But overrated in essence. But I need to say that I completely respect vegans for what they're trying to accomplish. I have dogs. I love animals too. I think it's incredible that they're doing everything for the animals. That is their ethos. And I think that's a very admirable mindset to have, that they're sacrificing that. But the ironic thing is, I think the vegan diet is overrated for preventing animal death. It's overrated from protecting the environment, and it's overrated for health. So the major problem with the preventing animal death is that even in the process of you not consuming animal products, you consume grain products that are killing animals. So you're still reinforcing this system that is still in the process of killing voles, mice, birds. There's runoff that could actually be affecting the environment. Like, no matter what, we have an impact. And even especially when it comes to, I've even heard of fruit having a huge impact, where when they spray the fruit, it's actually affecting villages locally. Like, we live in a fucking messy culture where you can't get around some sort of death or implication. You can't. So if you're going to be at home, you have a garden and backyard, all of the food that you eat is in your backyard, and you don't kill a single thing, by all means. So there was this woman in a documentary who was initially a vegan, and she was trying to grow her own food. And then she found she was having such an infestation problem with the bugs. And so then she was trying not to use pesticides and herbicides. So she would make plants for the bugs. And then she saw the bugs actually dying in these traps that she had made. And then she realized that, hey, no matter what, there's death here. And so her phrase was, there is death on the plate with no blood when it comes to vegan approach. There's still problems. And again, I respect the whole concept. And with that being said, I'll say it's overrated, or sorry, it's underrated, not to appreciate the animal death that goes on. It's I've been underrating how horrible our food system is for treating animals. And I should improve it. I think a lot of it has to do with just finances and being able to afford lean protein to maintain my nutritional goals. And I'm not saying that's ethically right. I'm not necessarily proud of it. You're just trying to maintain your own standard to some degree, but I think it's something I overall want to improve continuously. And to come to the when it comes to like the environment, the overall impact that the or the animal industry actually has on the global scale of greenhouse gas effect is very minor. Overall agriculture, I think, was just around 4%, and 2% of that was the animal agriculture. So it's like agriculture is doing it anyways, which is where your plants come from. So you're gonna need plants no matter what. It's going to affect the environment, and then half that, maybe half that, and that again, that you're talking about 2%. So everything comes down to transportation. Like that is the biggest impact. So as much as people want to say it's for the environment, it has such a small impact. There's way bigger problems and issues that we should be paying attention to. And when it comes to health, I don't want to say that people don't get healthier going vegan. So I think that is an inappropriate statement to say, because people can get healthier, but people can get much unhealthier too. It can go many different directions. Again, I don't like saying absolutes. I just think that there's details here. So take someone who eats a lot of processed food, meat, and burgers, all that kind of stuff, and they're just carefree with their diet, and all of a sudden they're going vegan and they got to eat salads and they all that stuff, and they're an overweight person, they got a lot of weight to lose. They simply eliminate processed fatty meat. That's probably going to actually help them, because they lower their calories instantly a lot. And they're trying to eat more salads, they're trying to eat more vegetables, they're having more fiber. There ends up being a good net result for them. But my thing is like, do that exact same thing with lean meat. Like, that is a good diet. That is exactly what I talked about in elimination diet. I said fruit, vegetables, and meat. Like, that's it. And I think you would be hard pressed to even give me an example of where lean meats and vegetables and fruit aren't correlated with positive outcomes. One of the major things that gets overrated in the research when it comes to meat and health, and this is overrated in research, is what you call correlative studies, correlated research. So when they correlate, which means they just kind of take an assessment, they don't do a specific study on controlling the variables. They just kind of observe what people do and they get accounts, right? So how much meat did you eat? And then they watch over a long period of time. Hey, how much meat are you eating on average over 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? These people live longer. These people have this result. These people have that. And so when they correlate, especially like red meat, they'll find that, oh, this is more linked with this. This is more linked. It's linked because it's correlates. They're kind of happen at the same time. And it's always correlation doesn't causation. And the best example of that is that ice cream sales go up when shark attacks happen. They're correlated, not causative, right? And so, although it's a very different situation, but you have a healthy user bias, right? So again, I'll go back to that same example. When someone's overweight, they decide to eliminate meat, but they're getting rid of processed meat and they're starting to just eat a bunch of vegetables, being health conscious all of a sudden. That's already a big sacrifice. Maybe they start walking, they start training, they do all this stuff, they get healthier. It's a good thing you went vegan. Now I'll give you another story. Someone who is actually even not at a bad body weight, but maybe they had ethical reasons that they wanted to go vegan. They're already actually kind of lean, and then they get very lean, and then they're actually B vitamin insufficient, and then they're low in iron, they're low in zinc, and then they're low in calcium. and now they're malnourished. This is where veganism is overrated because they're not doing this for health, but they're so steadfast. And I even seen a fitness influencer die from this. So I think it's super important to have context. Like I say, I understand how the idea of the vegan approach has some good chances of working for people. But if we just say, take some of that and you add lean meats, there's a good chance you're going to have a great outcome for most people. So I think that kind of covers it. It comes down to it. Veganism is overrated for the ethical impact. It is overrated for the environmental impact. And it is either appropriately rated for those who it makes a difference for. I'll respect that it can just make a difference for some people. They all of a sudden can just decide that they've done that, they lost the weight, they feel healthy, they feel great. That's appropriately rated for them. But it is overrated when someone ends up having a malnourished routine lifestyle because they went vegan. And I'll say it's overrated for people thinking that that's what they need, and they haven't even done an appropriate approach of whole foods with lean meats to improve their health outcomes. Another really good one here, traditional and cultural foods. I thought it was an interesting sentiment because it was like traditional slash cultural foods, when to eat, when should we eat? And I wouldn't necessarily see this as like an overrated, underrated question, but I'll just say it's overall underrated to realize that you can always include that food. Like, I mean, that's the whole ethos of my program, is that you include the foods you love. And there's a reason why so many people say you can include the foods you love. You can include the foods you love because you can. Now, the thing that I think gets overrated is thinking that you need to eliminate it all. This is actually Angelina. It's my partner. She's Filipino. And I love that she brought this up because with Filipino food, like there's a lot of unhealthy food in it, but it hasn't stopped her from including it. One of the ones I find really interesting is that so many Filipinos, when I talk to them about health, they're like, "Oh yeah, I got to stop eating so much rice." I'm like, I actually don't think that's the problem. It's the fried food, in that Filipino food rarely has lean meats. They have a lot of rice, they have a lot of fried food and fatty meat. And so we're just talking about a high fat, a lot of salt, a lot of preservatives, and then a lot of carbs. That is a recipe for disaster for your blood work, just because you're going to have high glycemic effect there. So people could be very susceptible to having diabetes, high blood pressure, and that kind of stuff. So that isn't necessarily healthy food always long term. But should you include it? Absolutely. And so this is one of the things I just got to say that is a bias of how I see food working for a lot of people, is that I believe that people should understand how to track their food, understand what's in it, right? So, and this is a route, not the route. And I'm not saying that you have to track your calories and your protein and everything. I'm not saying you have to weigh out all your food. I'm not saying that's the only way, because there are people who just go keto and they make it work. As I just mentioned, people who do vegan and all of a sudden they're healthier for the rest of their life. There's people who do paleo and they never look back and they never track a calorie. There's people who never track calories at all. There's people who've tracked calories and it made them worse. There's just so many ways up the hill. There's people who fast, and I think it's ridiculous. But there's so many ways things can work. I'm just telling you my bias on how I think people should try to make it work. And it may or may not work for them. But this is how I see it. And this is how it's even worked for Angelina, to include her traditional food. And that is, she got to know her food better from tracking. And it took a lot for her to get comfortable with it. She got comfortable with it. And now she eats, more whole food based on what we mentioned about like the rice, the veggies and meats, changes them up throughout the week. And she has a solid routine that she really likes when, she's more doing her routine, quote unquote, healthier eating. And when she's with her family and her family's having sinigang, which is just kind of it's kind of like a stew, not a stew, more of a soup that cooks in some vegetables and some beef on the bone, and delicious. She doesn't hesitate to have it. She doesn't hesitate to have her rice. One of her favorite foods is taron, which is like basically a deep fried banana. And no hesitation, you can actually see the grease in the bag. When I see these bags at her parents' place, it'll be on the table. and the grease is just leaking through. And I'm like, that's the dome. And we pull it out, and it's like, I don't hesitate to eat just one, right? Like we're just having a little bit here and there. Now, if that was routinely your diet, you're going to have a hard time getting success. Absolutely. Especially because one of the biggest challenges is you won't know what's in the food you're eating. And if you don't know what's in the food you're eating, how do you know how to improve your overall health? And the bias I'll come back to is that if you don't know the protein, calories, and all that stuff, it's hard to put you in the right direction. Now, some people can just go from serving sizes and you like fill up a plate, eat just a plate, and have this like the style that Canada's healthy food guys goes from. I'm pretty sure they do it in the South, a healthy place, like this much vegetables, this much carb, this much meat. And that's a style. I just don't believe that works for as nearly as well as like, no, this is what it is. And then we try to improve it because it puts you way more accurately in the right direction. It's a lot more work initially, but eventually you don't need to actually track everything. You can eyeball things because you've trained your eyeballs to recognize what's in food. Now, I just want to come back to, because I'm going off a tangent on just track. The reason why, but it is important to appreciate that if you calorie track, you get to know your food so that your basis of your food, 80% of the time at least, you have a good sense of what it is. Then when you're with your family, you want to include the Filipino food, you want to include whatever your traditional food is. Maybe you're Italian and you want to include pasta. Even if you're maybe gluten sensitive, it's going to make you bloated, but you want to fucking have your grandma's pasta, have it. You know the consequence of it because you at least know you get to sit down with your family and enjoy some food. That's valuable. And so that's why it's underrated, because you get to enjoy food with people that matter to you. Food experience is underrated. And cultural foods, like we have lefse, which I've talked about before, which is just butter and sugar on this kind of tortilla style patty that's made out of potato. It's butter and sugar. I don't know what it's doing on the dinner table, but I love it. And I'm going to include that when I'm going to sit down and have, Christmas dinner as we're having right away here. I'm going to include these foods because it's important to me. And you want to have that for sustainability. What food is important to you? What food do you get excited for when you're with your family and as a part of your culture? I'll just say that the challenge has to be around what else you're eating most of the time. I'm not even saying that someone should track those calories. I'm not figuring out what the calories are in the lefse. It's probably 100, 200 calories, whatever. It's not my everyday food. If you're trying to have cultural food like the Filipino food or whatever your culture is, and it's hard to track, then that's going to be hard to fit in. And again, that's my bias. The only thing that you can do from there is maybe look up some of the calorie tracking ideas on there. And sometimes you can find some of these cultural foods on there, but it will be significantly harder. And that's why I think you're best to control what you can, 80% of your diet, and then include those cultural foods along the way. And I just got to say, a little bit of a story on that of including it. Angelina had seen one of her neighbors. This was just this last summer. And the neighbor had complimented her, "Oh, you look so much smaller." And Angelina hasn't actually lost that much weight over the years of dating me, but from her neighbors had noticed it, and she said, "Oh, you're on a very strict diet. You diet very strict." She's like, "No, I include all the normal foods. I have a routine." And I thought it was super cool because she could just sit back and look. She's like, "Actually, I don't feel really restricted," because she's very comfortable with her food and she's comfortable being around her family and including her family in that food that she loves because it's what she grew up with and it matters to her. And that's what's going to make a difference long term. Okay, we're going to go into the exercise section now because I asked for overrated, underrated on exercise. And I had a great question about hard cardio, which essentially I'll just refer to as high intensity interval training, right? Because that's essentially what I think this individual is talking about. So I think HIIT training is underrated by those who don't use it and overrated by those who use it often. Let's first talk about why it's underrated and why you should do it. And that is because it helps your heart handle really heavy loads. It's like pushing out really big, intense pushes. That's essentially what it would have to do. Big, like pushes of the heart and having your lungs tested to that capacity, taking big, it'll improve your VO2 max because you're actually pushing in and out a lot. And then, your squat, like your squat has a better capacity because you're doing heavy squats. So this helps your heart handle being able to create big volume, and it would help your VO2 max, which will in long term help you just have a healthier heart and live a better life. And then what's the application is like in the event that you have to sprint or do something intense, it's not crazy for you. You're not going to panic when you have to go upstairs. And versus people who never do cardio, they go upstairs like, oh man, I'm winded. And you're just not afraid of being winded, and your body won't get as winded. It's normal if you're going to go up a flight of stairs. Let's say it's like 4 to 6 flights of stairs. If you're going upstairs, it's just human body. A lot of people, if you're heavy enough, you might just start to breathe heavier. I used to live at a place where Donald Street, where I was doing 10 flights of stairs. By the fourth flight, I would start to breathe heavy, and it wasn't I was winded, just normal. But a lot of people panic when they feel that. So that's why it's even important to expose yourself to cardiovascular stress so you don't panic when you have a cardiovascular stress in whatever you're doing. You have to help a friend move. You have to do something intense. It's not a big deal to you because you're actually used to it. And then I also think that it helps your mindset a lot because you're pushing yourself so hard. So sometimes high intensity interval training can be done, I don't think as appropriately, like if it's like 30 on, 30 off. Now, this is where I'm getting a little bit, I don't want to say elitist, but too particular with it. I used to be like, hey, it's not HIIT training if it's not 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 rest to work ratio, meaning you should have way more rest at work. And you should for getting more benefit. But at the same time, if people are pushing the heart rate really intense and it feels hard, I'm pretty okay with it, especially because it tends to come from a lot of boot camps that will do it that way. And if people are in a boot camp and they enjoy the environment, they're pushing hard, they're having fun. And that's why I actually think like mentally it helps you. With this group of people, I used to run TTF. It was awesome. Total Team Fitness. It was a boot camp. I used to hop in with them and we do these intervals, high intensity interval training, but it was sometimes 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. Man, I felt great from it. Like, and you felt like you just had to push like mentally. And then after, oh my goodness, felt awesome. And, I just had Don Moxley on. He talked about the dopamine rush that you get from it. Absolutely. Now, he doesn't like for athletes, which I totally understand. But I think as an individual that's just trying to be healthy, that's a good thing. That's a good reason. Now, you could also just use sport as your high intensity interval, right? So you can actually just, playing hockey will do it. You want to play soccer, you want to do a sport that can be your high intensity interval. But if you don't have sport, this is a great way to maintain that intensity and even maintain power output, right? Because power as you age is one of the major things that's going to decrease. If you watch Mike Tyson fight, like, he started explosive, but he lost the speed. Now, some people will argue whether or not it was bought and paid for. And I don't want to go into that tangent today, but for the most part, power will decrease. And if you do a sport or high intensity interval training, you might have a way to maintain that power. And realistically, kind of a form of athleticism, if you're doing a bunch of different like sprinting, maybe rowing, you're doing different forms of it. Maybe you try to join a class that allows you to box. Like those are really fun things. And as I mentioned, done in groups just gives you an incredible motivation to show up for it. So I think it can be very beneficial. Now, why is it overrated? And that would be overrated by anyone doing it more than twice a week. Even once a week, I think is plenty, because it can be really hard on the system. So I just mentioned, you're going really high intensity, you're going really hard at it, then that means that your gas tank's fried. And again, I'll go back to the episode with Don Moxley. He talked about how when you fry your CNS, when I'll use a better term, when you really like strain yourself from high intensity cardio and you end up with delayed onset muscle soreness, it can take 7 to 10 days for the CNS to recover, the central nervous system to actually produce power again. So this is hard on the system. So let's say you went and did a high intensity interval day and you go to do your leg day the next day, you're just not going to be as strong. So what matters more to you? If you have a strength conditioning program and one day a week you want to do high intensity interval, and the strength is technically more important, put that strength day before your HIIT day, your high intensity day, because then you're going to perform better on your strength. And if people are doing this every single day, like it's like, imagine you're doing deadlifts like 4 or 5 days a week. And some people do these boot camps that are so intense constantly. I have an interesting story about someone I was working with, and they told me about how when they were doing this program, there was either high intensity days for like training for exercise, and there was also high intensity cardio days. And so when they're doing the strength, it was time interval, which is, I know, can work because I do groups like that, but it can also be terrible because people cannot know their weights and they're completely overdoing the system. And then from there, the next day, they would do high intensity cardio. And then they do high intensity on the weights and high intensity cardio. And so what they had told me is they said, I wasn't losing weight and I felt puffy. And I was like, okay, and your calories are all the same. She's like, yes, I swear. I know it sounds crazy, but I just didn't like the way my body looked. My weight wasn't going anywhere. I'm like, and I asked her, when you stopped, did it go down? She's like, yeah, that sounds like a cortisol issue. So if you're going hard every day, cortisol is a normal response that you want from exercise because it actually helps the muscle break down to rebuild it. It's a part of the whole breakdown and recover. But if you're constantly in a cortisol state, that's where your body is actually going to retain water. Not to mention, you're just beat up, beat up, beat up. You're not recovering enough for the next intensity or the next training stimulus, right? And this is why, in general, I always encourage people to have no more than 2 to 3 days on and take a lighter day. Sometimes people have to, like, I have a boxer who goes 4 or 5 days in a row because it's just what his schedule can do. But I encourage him to have ebbs and flows where it's like, hey, maybe one of those boxing days, you're not going balls to the wall and you're actually just trying to go the right amount, is then you have a chance of recovering the system. Just think about how much it stresses the system and affects your other training. So if you're doing it any more than twice a week, that would then, well, if you're doing it twice a week, you should only be doing maybe 2 other days of strength a week. Likely, maybe 3 if you're really good at balancing out your rest days. But typically, just getting one good high intensity training day is enough. It's more than enough because you're working it really hard that day, unless you're spreading out high intensity interval sprints on your strength days, which you could also do as well. So you don't necessarily need to have a whole conditioning day so many days a week. You could have a high intensity sprint 3 days a week at the end of each of your strength sessions. So there's many different ways you break it up. But doing multiple days of high intensity interval training is just not good for you. It can't be, because you cannot maintain high intensity every day. And so eventually you're just working kind of hard and beating yourself up. And the worst thing is when people are doing this for the sake of weight loss and they're not losing weight, but they think that the more calories they burn, the better it is for them. So I think that's a really overrated approach. Okay, how important are shoes, straps, and equipment for training? This is a really good question because there are some things that I do agree with, but it depends on the context. As always, I'm going to give details. So shoes can be important, but depending on what kind and how you're going to use them. Arguably, if you're just doing fundamental strength training, you could be barefoot. Like I actually don't like people working out too much in like kind of soft running shoes. I'm not a huge fan of it. Like I have a client that does it. I don't worry too much because they want to be comfortable in their shoes. But I think you can work barefoot. And I just kind of go on a bit of a tangent on this. People worry about the sanitary approach of people being barefoot in a gym. And I'd seen someone get really upset over someone being barefoot in a gym and saying it was so gross. And I'm just trying to think about why they think the floor is that clean with their shoes. If your shoes are going over a gym that is guaranteed covered in sweat that you can't see, and someone's foot is just, their barefoot is on the ground, it's no different than the bottom of your shoe. The bottom of anyone's shoe, even if it's an indoor shoe, is not clean unless you clean it, sanitize it absolutely every day. And even then, the moment you walk through that gym, even if that gym gets clean once or twice a week, you got dirty feet. Like that's what it is. The only really big health risk about wearing shoes in a public gym, more for the individual, because again, I think the floor is dirty, not their feet, not nearly as dirty, unless they just haven't, showered in a couple of days. It's just more something falling on their foot. That's the biggest risk. So if something falls on your foot, there's nothing to break that, nothing to prevent your skin from breaking open or anything. It's more of a health risk for the foot, not anyone else worrying about them being barefoot. And I just think people get very uncomfortable with unnecessary things sometimes. So that was a side tangent. Back on the shoes. I think some sort of a barefoot shoe or like a training shoe that has minimal kind of effect to it if you're just lifting is great. So I'm a big fan of the Notorious Lifts that Angelina got me. Vibram's another one. Some people just use Converse. Just make sure that it's flat and it's more of a wide toe box. As if you have wider feet, like if you have a narrow foot, then make sure it fits. Just make sure you don't feel too narrow in it. But this individual might have been talking about lifting shoes because there are powerlifting shoes that should be for powerlifters, right? Like if you're powerlifting, you're competing in the sport, by all means, yeah. Like and even then, you may or may not need it, but it probably will help most powerlifters, from my understanding, because essentially it lifts their heel up about an inch, and then that way they can get more depth and push more into their ankles. Because it gets rid of their ankle lack of mobility that people can have in their ankles, what can restrict them in their squat depth from their knees. So if you have that heel come up, then the ankle won't affect how much you can bend your knees, and you can get deeper in the squat with some more comfort. So lifting shoes, I think, are logical, not I think appropriately rated for powerlifting. They can be I'd say anytime you're using powerlifting equipment and you don't intend on competing, it's probably overrated. Now, with that being said, straps. So wrist straps, if you're not aware, commonly worn around your wrist. You wrap it around the bar so that you can, say, deadlift more, or you can wrap it around something like something as a row, like a single arm row or barbell row or something. That I think is underrated to some degree because so many people don't have a really strong grip. I think it's great if you're not trying to compete for powerlifting. I think use as straps as minimal as you can. Always use that the least amount as possible. But if your goal is to have a strong deadlift, that's the exercise you're doing, then use straps the moment it becomes a problem. Versus, I'm not telling you not to have just use it no matter what in your warm-up sets. And if you want to have a stronger grip, like let's say, yeah, I want to have a stronger grip though, do a grip exercise, right? It's like that's the intention of the exercise. And you can still just do the warm-up sets in your deadlift, do the warm-up sets on your rows. Like those would be the major ones, would be deadlift, rows, maybe pull downs. Pull-ups are kind of awkward to set it up, but you can. If the limitation is not in the intended muscle and it's in the grip, straps are great. I think they're underrated for people because people don't realize how weak their grip is, and they should consider getting them. If your goal is to powerlift long term, then I would hardly use them. Like I'm currently just trying to get used to deadlifting without straps again. Now, if I never wanted to powerlift in a competition, and once I'm done powerlifting in competition, I'm going back to straps. It is way easier to lift things off the ground with straps. So I highly recommend them. So I think it's underrated for people who don't use them but want to just get strong and don't care about actually competing in the sport. Bench wraps. I've seen people use bench wrist straps. I actually don't know. I got to experience it. I've never been coached on it. One of my clients even uses them, and I just haven't used them. I imagine it would actually help, but again, it depends on what your overall goal is for things. Weight belts is one I really want to do. I think it is overrated for a lot of people, not for everyone. If you are, again, a competitive power lifter, you're doing this and you know that you're going to hit some heavy PRs. If you're doing what I call super physiological weight, meaning the average person can't handle that physiology. So you're doing above average, what you like way above average, what most people can do, then you should be using tools to help you improve that, right? And bear in mind, powerlifters can't actually compete with their belts, but it makes sense why they would do it because they want to actually improve what their body can handle. And they have to take a lot of heavy loads. I see some guy wear a weight belt on a lat pull down. He has no fucking clue why he's wearing a weight belt. I've never used a weight belt. I've used it once. Didn't even know if it made a difference because I never believed I had the weight that earned it. So I believe you have to earn the right to use it and know how to brace first. And so a lot of people don't get the idea of how to brace in their stomach, maintain their rib cage down, but also putting air down in their stomach, not in their chest. And that's actually what braces you when you're doing one of your power lifts, like a deadlift or a squat. And it's like if you understand that and then you get to push against a belt, it makes sense. But it is completely overrated for people who don't know the fundamentals of bracing. And I don't have specific numbers, but I would say I'm going to ballpark. If you're not at your body weight in, let's say squat or, near double your body weight in deadlift, I don't think you need a belt. That's just I'm ballparking those numbers. Not really 100% sure, but I think it's pretty fair to say that a lot of people overrate how often they need belts because they haven't even done enough technical work on the movement. The belt is not what's making them stronger. The technique will make you stronger way more, and doing the appropriate loads will make you stronger way faster. And learning how to build up your core is really what is underrated when it comes to belts. Okay, so now we got into the overrated, underrated for diet ideas. We kind of covered a bit of nutrition, but I want to be very specific to weight loss. And this is an awesome one. The cabbage soup diet. What the fuck is a cabbage soup diet? Like, that was my first instinct. This is a thing? Like, this is a thing people do? Like, we're still coming up with just, let's eat this one thing. Like, my dad had been told to have a grapefruit diet. Just grapefruit. I don't even like that on a good, just to have grapefruit. I don't even like that fruit. And my dad tried it. It was coffee and grapefruits. And it's just never a good thing. And AJ's told me this before, and I got him credit for it. If it's called a diet, like the diet of this specifically, if it's given a label, probably not a good idea. It's your diet. It's always your diet. You don't have to be like, hey, what diet you're on? It's like my diet. Like, that's all it is. Right. And I'm okay if people sometimes will give you in a sense of how you eat. And I don't mind that because I can understand that. My friend will say, yeah, I'm kind of paleo, whole 30-ish. I'm like, okay, I get it. Trying to go for whole foods. I don't mind it. I don't think you should categorize yourself with it. You can just say I eat predominantly whole foods, but I have some treats. Like, that's what a lot of people will tell you to do, right? You don't need a label for these things. In this diet, I hadn't even heard about. So it's easy to say it's overrated. Very safe. But it makes sense why it works. You're just eating soup. It's a soup diet. Not to mention cabbage. Like, that just doesn't sound great. Too low protein, too low in nutrients, and this is setting you up for failure because you're trying to do it. Like, it even I looked this up on an article that they tried to talk about it. I'm surprised they actually just said so many nice things about it. Like, it can work, it can lose weight and all that stuff. It's like keto, and it's like you're being way too kind on this. And they had said who shouldn't do it. It's like, pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and one of the ones was people with eating disorders. I'm like, that's a spectrum now. I think a lot more people are falling into this issues around disordered eating than ever before, and this is not a long-term solution. And whenever it's a diet, it's like, if it's not the way you intend on eating, like the keto diet, if you intend on eating keto the rest of your life, amazing. But I highly doubt anyone wants to eat cabbage soup the rest of their life. So it's a terrible idea, overrated. I don't suggest it. And hopefully no one actually tries that. Okay, another really good question here for the overrated, underrated number on the scale, on the weight scale. So this is actually, they're going to be kind of surprised by this answer. I do think the number on the scale is overrated by people who don't know how to interpret it, but it is underrated by people who are afraid of using it appropriately. This is my bias because I know how to use it appropriately and how to interpret the data. So I'd almost say, like, if you're not being health conscious, you're not routinely understanding your food, even calorie tracking, knowing your food consistently, eating the same types, that's where it's overrated. It's like, you're not consistently trying to have the same diet pattern, improving your health. The scale is not going to be very useful for you. And again, my bias is like calorie tracking, so you know that you're eating the right quantity of calories, the right quantity of calories that should put you in a direction, protein, carbs. And so that's where the scale is not going to help you. It's like, yeah, I'm kind of eating healthy. So I'll give you a scenario here. Like, someone says that they're eating healthy, but they don't know their calories. Yeah, I'm eating pretty healthy. It'll tell you the food types. Okay, but do you know how many calories it is? No. And it's like, okay. And they track they're watching their weight every day, and it goes up and down, or it's up and down, up and down. It's like, it stays the same. And most likely what they're doing is they're eating healthy-ish during the week, maybe even too few calories in the week. The weight almost goes down. And on the weekend, because they're doing social occasions, they're snacking way more, and the weight goes back up. And so they actually just end up at a net balance because they're not eating enough during the week, and they think they're losing weight, and then they end up eating too much on the weekend, and it ends up being a net balance. So that scale is useless right now because you don't know the actual quantity of calories that you're having. So it's underrated to use when you have data. And when we have data, we actually want to control our food the best we can. And this is where I'll go back to like the whole 2-week challenge, where I go back to just understand your food fully, appreciate what it does. And I've seen so many of my clients, they get the best success where it's like, hey, 2 weeks straight of this food. Like we just eat it, not forever, just for now. And you just go on that scale every day and we'll see it go up and down, and then it'll start trending downwards. Hey, this stuff works. And that's what you need to appreciate the scale for. Now, there's a lot of things the scale can do within that 2 weeks. Let's say you're new to strength training and protein intake. The scale might not actually move much at all. And this is why I say you have to interpret it, because someone just doing that, they eat the 2 weeks and they are new to protein, they're new to strength training, they could be in recomposition. So they could be building muscle and losing body fat at the same time. They wouldn't know. And that's why I'll even say the scale is overrated to be used on its own. So if you then add a waist measurement to that, you're eating high protein, appropriate amount of calories, you're weighing yourself every day, you're doing strength training, then you take that waist measurement 2 to 3 weeks after you're in this new diet plan. Oh, hey, my weight's the same, but my waist is down an inch. That's recomposition. That is building muscle and losing body fat, which is very common, especially on a new diet, on a new amount of protein intake and a new training plan. You see it very commonly when people sign up. So it has to do with like how you use a scale that really matters. And even when I talk to people to sign them up and I ask them about like, do you have a goal? And some people will say a weight. And I actually was speaking with someone recently where they didn't say a weight. And I said, I really like you didn't talk about a weight, because you don't know what that weight's going to mean for you. Because if someone says, I got to lose 40 pounds, like, do you know it's 40? Because if you're, again, new to training, we got muscle to build. We might have body fat to lose, but you don't know how you're going to feel 20 pounds down. Because you might be like, hey, I feel great. Might have gained 5 to 10 pounds and just feel terrific. Might have netted more fat loss in that process. So it's super important that you use the other tools with it, and also know that the ebbs and flows. So this is where the scale can be overrated. It can overcast things. You have a high carb day, or if you have a high salt day. There was one time where I had this during my bodybuilding prep a couple of years ago, where I used garlic salt in one of my foods that I prepared. And not only did the food taste terrible because I used way too much of it, just skyrocketed my salt intake, skyrocketed my water retention. I was up 2 pounds. And once I went out, I was down like 2.5 after. So I was still getting my weight loss, but it threw off the numbers so much. And if I didn't know that's what salt did, it would really, demoralize me. And you got to use the scale over time to know what can happen. High carbs, high salt, high stress, less sleep. So many things can cause to go up. And if you watch the scale consistently over a long period of time, and you consistently do the same habits, same training, same sleep, same nutritional intake, same weight of the food, like weigh your food on a scale, that's when those numbers really matter. So the other thing I want to mention too about scale tracking is that there could be a benefit to doing it long term, even after you lost the weight. So if you get better relationship with what the weight means, it can go up and down. You don't panic. And then even after you've lost the weight, it's a good long-term habit to keep checking in. Maybe it's not every day, but maybe it's every other, or maybe it's once a week. Because when they look at the weight loss maintenance analysis, they actually did a research article on reviewing when people have lost so much weight and kept it off, which is very rare. It's like 5% of people. So it's like a lot of people lose weight, but 95% of people gain it back. It's 5% of people who are maintaining it. One of the habits they had was to weigh in still, because they got more familiar with that weight and then maintained their relationship with, okay, I'm going a little bit too much. Maybe I got to dial back on this and not go into the old habits. So it might be a helpful thing, even in the long term. So just to kind of summarize, it can be overrated if you don't know how to use it. It can be underrated if you're really trying to go to a specific goal and you're able to use all of the other tools with it. So I think it has its place, but it's not just using it carelessly. It can be the right tool to put you on the right direction. Okay, so that's it for the overrated, underrated. Let's talk quickly to finish up here with my fitness update. I'll dive into the exercise first. And whether or not, I'm not sure whether or not you were watching my Instagram in the last little while, but I hit a lifetime PR. I didn't think I was going to hit, but I managed to get over 600 pounds on my sumo deadlift. Now, I put these asterisks out there. It's sumo, it's not conventional, which powerlifting people would argue conventional is more legit. It's a longer, it's harder to do to some people. It is harder for me to do, but the people who do conventional can't do heavy sumo. So, anyways, either way, I got 610 pounds and I did two singles within 60 seconds of each other because I'm doing cluster sets. So I always ramp up to do my heavy set, but my heavy set will only be anywhere from 1 to 3 reps. And I do 60 seconds rest of clusters. So I'll do a rep, 1 to 3 reps, make sure they feel fast. They're heavy, but they have to feel fast. And as soon as I feel like it might decline speed, then I stop. Then I shouldn't do that rep. And I rest 60 seconds and I do it again. The first week, I usually do 2 to 3 reps, 60-second rest. I do 4, and then I'll do 2 to 3 reps for about 5 sets with 60-second rests. And then I go into singles and I do 6 singles with 60-second rests. And, it was just funny because I blew by the 575. That was like my PR in the summer. And then I got to like 585. I'm like, this is not heavy. I'm going to be able to hit this really soon. Sure enough, the next cycle, mesocycle, went in, came up to the 600. It was like, this is easy. Even the first couple times doing 600, it felt easy. I mean, it felt heavy. Like, I'm not telling you I'm lifting a paperweight. Like, it's still the heaviest shit that I lift. But if I were to compare the experience of, I want to say my 570, or 565, I can't remember which it was that I did a couple years ago. That was probably one of the heaviest experiences. And then when I did mine during the summer, felt really heavy. But this time, didn't feel that heavy. Like, it didn't feel like relative to what my body was okay with. Still heavy. But my body was very okay with it, right? So that's exciting. Like, my deadlift's really good. And I did finally reach out to a therapist, as I promised on this podcast. I would get some help. I am working with someone online. She's been really good. We have not had terrific success in getting my knee completely aligned, but she has given me a really cool routine, really understanding my body better. And I'm working with her virtually, which is really cool. And she's very integrated. I can Vox her, like it works really good. What she's done more than anything is reprogram my squat, completely different, which is really fascinating. I'm learning and understanding, and I see it now, why my quads are so big is because I'm very quad dominant. And when I go to line up for my squats, is I always want to bend my knees. And she's like, no, like, let's stop doing that. Let's go posterior chain. And I even think that is a part of the problem with a knee, because when I stand upright, I don't like to lock out my knee. I don't like to stand with a knee locked out, but it's like, now that I'm doing it, I'm actually noticing less tension on my knee when I'm just standing or walking around. So I think there is something to that, to helping the knee recover. And it's just completely changed how I squat, because normally I bend my knees right away, and now I'm going into my hips and squatting through my hips a lot more. So, and just recently, a few days ago, I actually had some pretty good squats, not crazy heavy, 375. I've done well over 400, but in this completely new style. I'll be excited to see how that goes. And my bench has some good days, has some bad days. It's just because my shoulder's been up and down. I had this one weird strain in my upper trap a couple weeks ago, and this was actually on a deadlift day. And this is just a pretty big lesson on what you do the day before, how it can affect the next group. And I hadn't done a push-pull split in so long, but I was trying something out because working out 3 days in a row, I'm like, okay, I'll do lower. Maybe I'll try something different. I'll do a push day and a pull day, but normally I do a push-pull and then arms. And so I just wanted to try something different, and it felt good doing those movements. But the problem is I went push-pull, sort of lower, push-pull, and then I had to do my lower again because I was trying to not be as sore for my hockey game. And when I went to do my lower, because it was deadlift, my whole posterior chain, my back is just like really, really pushing that. I'm doing the style of squat, which is a safety squat bar. But again, I'm going very posterior chain. There's two things that are really a lot of traps. Plus, I just came off that pull day and just doing lunges, going to put down the dumbbells, or I think put them down or pick them up. I think it's putting them down, and I just let them go. Oh, something really strained in my neck. And so I've been kind of dealing with that too. My shoulder was doing better. And so that's something I probably will work with my therapist for. But here's the more important thing. I just want to come back. The bench is like strong, but I think the limitation of the shoulders try to solve that. But the more important thing is I have to commit to a competition this year. The shoulder is healthy enough, I think he can handle a competition, and the knee is getting healthy enough that he can handle competition. If it was me 2 to 3 months ago, my hip was bothering me so much more, and something the therapist actually pointed out that it could have just been my lateral quad, not my IT band, and that's kind of gone away. And so again, I'm feeling stronger in the squat, deadlift for sure. And I just need to put in this competition. The first one doesn't have to be perfect. I need to show up. This has to be a participation trophy, attempt. And honestly, if my deadlift's that strong, I'll place pretty well anyways, right? And I just got to go through the process. The first time is to go through the process. I want to do at least two, maybe three. But I got to see how the first one goes. And the other major thing is next year, my plan is to go back to school. So I probably won't even have time. So I'm hoping I can get one, maybe two competitions in before I go back to school, because powerlifting is so fucking time consuming in the gym that it's probably not the best hobby for me to have while I'm trying to go back to school. So that's something I'm planning on doing in the new year. I'm planning on reaching out to uh, Curtis Taylor, who's been on this podcast before, and we'll be chatting here very shortly, and I'm going to learn from him. So I'm super excited about that. We'll talk quickly about diet here. My diet, this is pretty good. In all honesty, I mentioned improving my IBS symptoms, which has actually really helped me because I thought I was eating too much, but it wasn't so much that. It was just like bloating and gas a lot. And now I'm feeling a lot better because I pay attention to the foods that aren't doing as well for me. And for the first time ever in my life, this is incredible. This is remarkable to me. I'm like trying to gain weight slowly, but trying to gain weight. And this was the first time last week where my appetite isn't actually steering me to eat enough. I'm not kidding you. Now, bear in mind, I'm just very active with work, with maybe running around to do different things for not just work, but like shopping and errands and stuff. But the step count, it's just like not even trying. I'm like, oh, wow, that's fucking 14K steps again, 14K steps. That's what I was trying to do when I was doing bodybuilding. Now it's just happening. Plus, I've been eating near calorie maintenance or surplus for so long, my metabolism is just getting more and more revved. And I would have these days, I'm like, yeah, I think I ate enough. And I just didn't track, but I tracked ballparks roughly where it should be, or I'd track 2 or 3 meals and I would eat most around the same serving size I normally do. And then I'd weigh in the next day. I'm like, what? I'm still 212. Like last week, I actually did a slight deficit week. And then after that, my body is just like, no, like we could actually use more. And I was just constantly amazed. Like I was even like before bed, I was eating cake because I was just like, I need more calories. And then I weigh in the next day and I'm still light. I'm like, I could have ate more calories. So it's pretty incredible that my body's finally gotten to this place, because I know I work with clients who eat just to appetite and it's hard. So I'm pumped about that. The downside is I've been waiting for this all my whole life. I've been waiting to say, hey, to eat too many calories is hard. I've been waiting for that. And I'm 2 weeks away to go back into a deficit. So that's the only downside here. But my weight is right around 215, 214 right now. A couple more weeks here. I'm not going to have an issue with the surplus. It's the holidays, this coming out on Christmas. And so I will not have an issue with hitting at least maintenance calories. But yeah, I'll be really interested to see where my DEXA scan comes, because I'm going to be doing a DEXA scan in a couple of weeks here. And I've been really focused on my builds for my arms, not so much my legs, because I actually just want performance out of my legs. So I'm not doing a ton of volume on my legs. I'm just doing enough to maintain strength and leaving more reps in reserve for my legs. And then even my chest and my back, I was doing some muscle building, some rest pause sets that would help me build more muscle. But I was really focused, especially earlier in the fall. I was doing like 3 arm days, and now I'm just doing 2 because I did want more chest and back. But I think I've noticed more of an arm growth than anything in the last year, which is great. But I would really I'm excited to see the number, that because the DEXA scan usually can break down the limbs. So I'll be excited to see what it can do. It wouldn't be able to measure my chest because it's part of torso, but it should be able to individualize the arms and just see the growth in the arms specifically. And so going into the next challenge coming up here, I normally do like to push it off a little bit, but I felt like it would be good because I just kind of want to help, be with people who are doing the New Year challenge, right? Everyone does the New Year challenge this time of year, getting ready, and I'll do it kind of with people at the same time. I'll be, trying to improve my diet over the 60 days. But here's the thing, it's a 60-day metabolic cookie monster challenge. Now, I've done a lot of different things over the past few years. This one is a cookie every single day because that's what the metabolic cookie monster is all about. You can eat your cookies and still lose weight. You can build your metabolism. So every day I'm going to be eating a cookie. It could be morning, noon, night, at least once a day for 60 days. And I chose 60 days. I think it's a good amount where I'm going to see a pretty significant weight loss. And I feel really good about this one because I felt last time when I did my weight loss, I want to say I kind of fucked around. I don't want to say I fucked around as I was just a bit more passive on how well I know I can push myself in diet. And I didn't push myself as hard, right? And it's not that hard to push because I know I can get to a lower body weight quicker. And I felt like it was month 3 is where I really went into it. And that was my best month. And if I just take that attitude right off the bat, I know I'll have good success in this. I know all my dietary strategies, how to, improve appetite and everything. And not to mention, I have a very fast metabolism right now from what I can tell. Like, I'm not sure exactly where my calorie maintenance is, but I think it's higher than it is on average because I've been so active and I've been eating so much for like 6 months now, right? And I really like to be able to go into this cut, get the weight loss down, and then to go into a nice slow build for even longer, right? So doing instead of 6 months, maybe I go for 8 to 10, or go all the way to the end of the next year. And because it's so important to build muscle to not stay in deficits. And now with kind of what I see as the routine is going into slight deficits has been really effective. I'm not sure if I explained this on the show before, but essentially, I don't do full mini cuts, but kind of. Every time I go into a new mesocycle, I do a new mesocycle, meaning like a new intensity program. So I start a new program. This is week 1 of the program. And so I'm going a little lighter, more reps in reserve on my power lifts, my accessories, and everything. Fewer sets as well. So they're quicker workouts. Now, this week, it's kind of like a deload, but I don't go full deload. I just do a light week of a new program. And in this week, because I don't expect muscle growth because the volume's so low, I actually do slight deficits. And a slight deficit for me would be maybe 23 to 2,500 calories. That should bring me under the 2,700. And I could be anywhere from 2,700 to 3,000 calories a day as calorie maintenance. The one thing they always say when they talk about it in the literature is like, if you're more than a 500 calorie deficit, that's where it's hard to build or maintain muscle. So if I stay just a little bit under where my calorie maintenance is, it's enough where it actually makes me feel a little lighter. I don't feel as bloated from eating so much. And I see some minor weight loss, which is actually not bad in the middle of a building season. But then the next week, I'm going to bring it back up to maintenance. And this helps me just not put on too much weight. I noticed it a lot in the last several months that I did it. I would only do it once a month, slight deficits for 5 or 6 days. I would still even eat maintenance calories on the weekend, but it was enough to actually control my appetite again, remind me what a deficit feels like, and then to go back into slowly easing into the calorie maintenance, and then maybe into a slight surplus as I'm later with higher volume in the program, week 3, week 4, maybe week 5 if I'm pushing it. And that has been a really good long-term strategy for me managing my weight over time. And that's what I'm hoping to do for many months. But as I mentioned, I'm going to go into the Cookie Monster Challenge here coming up. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm actually going to do a ton of baking today. So I even have a bunch of cookies left over after the holidays. Might do some baking even after Christmas, just so I have a bunch of cookies on stock, because I think one of the hardest things is going to have cookies around, because I normally don't have that many cookies. We always have our Imperial cookies on the weekend, but got to have a lot more cookies for this because I need at least 60 of them, right? And you want to have variety. You want to have experience with them. So But that's about it. I think I updated you on a lot there. And don't forget about the do-it-yourself fitness group that is coming up. Remember to please reach out if you want to be a part of that do-it-yourself fitness group, because I want to start creating a community of people who just want to help each other. It's not just with the information I'm providing, which I'm giving a ton of information in it. Plus, I'm going to be having Q&A lives in there where every couple of weeks you can join the Q&A live, answer any more personalized questions and challenges you might be having with your diet and your training. So want to be able to offer those things for you. You got to reach out if you want in on that group. And of course, I'll update you as anything else comes along the way. I hope to let you know about how the powerlifting goals go. I hope to let you know about how the training goes, and keep a good watch on my Instagram, as I will take you along my weight loss journey again this year. And you'll see all the different cookies that I get to eat along the way as I go to lose weight. But I hope you learned a lot today. I hope you appreciated this. And I always appreciate you as a listener. Please try to leave a review if you can. I love any feedback. It helps the podcast. If you can leave a 5-star review, that's amazing. It means so much to me. And especially if you can share this with someone who you think might benefit from this information. That's the only way that it can grow, is if referrals are the best way for anything to grow, right? So please share this with someone if you know it's going to help them. But again, I always got to say this so sincerely. I appreciate you so much spending your time with me and allowing me to help teach you to go after your own ambition, going after the things that matter most for you, because it's not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.